We're going to go to the public comment item on the agenda. Out of curiosity, how many people at this point are expected to make some kind of public comment? Okay, could you please, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Because there's a number of you that do want to make public comment, and we have quite an action-packed agenda today, I'm going to ask that you keep your remarks to 2 minutes or less. Ms. Zork has offered to act as my timekeeper. She'll probably nudge me, and I will nudge you. We will not turn your microphone off if we have your words. The thing we should know about public comment is the board cannot respond to any public comment made today. In other words, because something's not on the agenda necessarily, means that we can't make comment on it until it does appear on the board agenda for subsequent meetings. So just be aware that there will be no response coming back to the board at the time that you make the public comment. Okay? Whoever would like to could approach the microphone. You can use the standing microphone, or you can use the 2 microphones at the table. They're all on, from what I understand.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Kathleen Russell. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Judicial Excellence. Since I only have 2 minutes, I'm not going to go into great detail about who we are. But we are here to address the Board of Psychology today because this body is charged with oversight of our state's PhD psychologists, many of whom are appointed by judges to work in custody and visitation proceedings in family courts. I've been working with your enforcement manager, Sandra Monterrubio, or speaking with her for the past number of months to ensure that your board removes a significant roadblock to protecting the public, which is your child custody checklist, which I was very upset to see and learn had been on your website for quite some time. That checklist shows a severe lack of understanding about the crisis in the family court system in California. To assume, and I understand this has been taken down, but we're here today, and to be concrete with you, I'm requesting that you do a thorough review of your ability to investigate PhD psychologists that are involved in family court matters, because we know we're on the front lines. Children are routinely being taken from safe, nurturing parents and forced into contact with physically and sexually and emotionally abusive parents. The psychologists in our state are healers. They're here to help families heal, particularly through a very contentious and difficult divorce, when children are reporting that they're being raped, beaten, and molested. To suggest that somehow, and you need to understand that there are a number of corrupt psychologists, and we're developing a list and sharing that list with the media and with state legislators. They are using junk science, parental alienation, and they're taking kids and putting them in harm's way. And I would just let you know that we're here to educate you today about what's happening, and we hope that you will ensure that this administrative subpoena is an effective way to investigate and not just let these complaints drag on, which I know some have dragged on for over 2 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, and this article in the Sacramento News and Review is a great summary of what's happening in family court, so I'll leave this with your staff.
My name is Yilma. I'm a distinguished professor of virology in the School of Medicine and Veterinary Medicine. As a member of the National Academy of Science, I have served on the Committee of Human Rights of the National Academies for 3 years. I just wanted to bring your attention to the plight of children. The family court system is a highly organized criminal cottage industry that operates as a cartel whose members include judges, such as Kathleen White, Samuel McAdam, lawyers, mediators, and vicious psychologists such as Catherine Yeager that use children as a hostage in order to fleece parents down to their last pennies. So why am I here today? Is just to bring to your attention that there are corrupt. She negotiates, she prevents, she negotiates how much money. I was asked to pay $50,000 to $100,000 extortion money, sign off my home, because the mother of my child had bipolar syndrome. She blocked that information from being released. So what is my hope? If some of you could remember, when Michael Vick was abusing dogs, he was convicted, put in prison for 21 months. He lost millions and millions of dollars. I beg you to bring the right of children to the same rights dogs enjoy through the animal rights law. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Ariana Riley. I am one of the children that has been affected by the family court and psychologists. So I was brought into the family court where the judge was supposed to make a judgment, and she said I was to go to a psychology program or educational program called Family Bridges. They had brought in called their transport agents. They basically, their job is to kidnap children. I laid on the ground. So I came all the way from Seattle, Washington. This happened in Seattle, Washington. I laid on the ground and said I didn't want to go. I wasn't consenting. At the time, I was 16. I'm 17 now. And I know I have a right to consent to any psychological treatment. They threatened to put me in jail. They said, if you do not go with us, we will put you and your dad in jail. So then they took me to the airport. I tried to talk to the police. I said, please let me talk to the police. Please let me talk to the police. I'm being kidnapped. I don't consent to this. I'm being kidnapped. TSA would not let me talk to the police. I finally, in the security line, said, I had a bomb in my shoe. I need you to bring the police now. At that point, after I screamed my lungs out for 2 minutes and made a huge scene, they brought the police. The transport agents handcuffed me and drove me and my sister down to Ontario, California, where we met with my mom, her boyfriend, and the psychologists, Dr. Randy Rand, Dr. Jane Schatz, and Dr. Julie Werner. My mom and her boyfriend have been abusive, which is why I didn't want to live with them. So the transport agents explained that if I did not behave and consent to this educational treatment program, that I would be sent to a wilderness facility or to a mental health facility.
Ma'am, I just want to make sure you get to make your main point because your time is actually up.
Okay. So my main point is that I was held by these psychologists for 4 days and longer. My sister is still there. I know that I have a right. I have rights to, number one, consent to treatment, and number two, to not be held without an evaluation for more than 72 hours. And you guys have an obligation to investigate this and ensure that children have rights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Microphone closer to your mouth.
Sure. My name is Darrell Riley. That was my daughter who's talking. I'm actually here on behalf of my daughter, Madeline. We flew in from Seattle just to talk to you. The Family Bridges, they claim to be educational, but I have evidence that they are a multi-day residential program. They claim success rates of 77 to 95%. Those numbers cannot be real. I followed the recommendations of the Federal Trade Commission to try to investigate or look in the Better Business Bureau on all the other agencies to see if there was anything about them. There was nothing about them. The materials that they claim to publish in peer-reviewed journals, and I want to actually read this to you a little bit because they are not submitted as empirical studies and therefore are not evaluated as research and fact-checked. They are treated more like marketing under the following category: practice innovations. They have no active business license as far as I can tell, and therefore they are probably not paying any taxes. So they're getting, as far as I can tell, about $2.6 million tax-free with no regulation except you. And my daughter is still in this program. These people came and they did quite terrible things to them. They brought them to California, as you heard my daughter explain. It was really traumatic. It was very devastating. My daughter is still distraught. And my youngest daughter has not been in contact with us for a solid year, almost. And she ran away from home to try to express her concerns and was returned to her mother. And she is still under the control of the Family Bridges psychologists. And she's still complaining, I guess would be the best word, to the authorities, and so far no one has taken action. You are the people who need to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair and members of the board, thank you so much for this public comment time. I'm going to leave you a copy of my 3 minutes so I can say get in 2 minutes in. I'm here to just bring awareness. I am a person who heard my children say they were abused, and I've been in the courts a very long time because I think abuse is very hard for people to handle or hear, but it's also because psychologists who have worked on our case have invalidated the abuse to the point where I lost custody of my children for over 3 years. They were forced to live with their abusive father. And even when they finally told, well, they were telling about the abuse for years. It kept being invalidated. And when I finally heard through CPS that they had actually told them directly that they were sexually abused, sleep with knives under their pillows to protect themselves while they were out of my care, they're still with him. And I was forced into 50-50 custody, and it was ignored. Things that have happened to us are just unacceptable, and I am with a group of women also who we found each other ironically, who have all had one same evaluator. These evaluators have such good reputations, they are not being, they're not given the discipline that they need, so they know they can get away with it, so it just continues. We had reports that were filed to the court that said that the child denied the abuse when that actually never happened. The false reporting stays in the docket, and it just becomes truth. You know, when all these things start happening about alternate facts, I thought, well, welcome to family court. The evaluators, the psychologists invalidate abuse, and I'm going to leave this with you so you can see my full comments. But thank you for this time, and please understand this needs your attention. Catherine Campbell Rafa. Write it down.
Actually, none of require people to identify themselves, so that's what I asked.
My name is Marc Mulholland. I'm an all-American boy. I was an Eagle Scout. Sorry, it's still fresh. I was an Eagle Scout, accepted a full ride use of ROTC scholarship to a top university, graduating in engineering. I held a top secret clearance when I worked in defense contracting and was an elder in my church for a number of years. I have never been arrested, though not from lack of my son's mother trying to get me arrested. Yet I have zero custody of my son, having spent half my net worth defending myself from my son's mother's false accusations. From my experience of the last 5 years, I believe that the family court system is ripe with corruption. If you want to know how bad it can be, look closely at my case in San Mateo County, number F0113102. When I was asked who I wanted for my PhD, I could not find a place that would give me the background results of the potential candidates. Even my honest lawyer did not know where to get that information. So we ended up with Dr. Leslie Packer. Going through her process, I realized that she was completely incompetent. I told my lawyer. He said, wait until the report comes out. About a year later, my lawyer commented to me that he had seen her work on other cases, and now he agreed with me. I was given the opportunity to pick a different PhD for a BFA, but Dr. Packer was the least expensive as she already knew the case. I felt that since we had proven in court that the reason she had taken the petitioner's side was because of a bold-faced lie, that I had a probable chance to be redeemed. Such was not the case. Dr. Packer is highly biased and completely incompetent. One would think that if a 5-year-old is physically hitting his mother, that should be in her report. If a 5-year-old boy is showering with an HIV-positive adult male visiting his mother home, that should also make a report. But neither of these were even mentioned, though I brought both of them to Dr. Packer's attention. Nor was the murder that was committed in my son's mother's greater family that was caused by the ongoing sexual abuse in her family.
I need you to make your primary point because you've run out of time.
Okay, well, point is, there needs to be a system that either party can get an investigation of fairness when it's obvious that things aren't logical. Never have I been given reasons for the decisions made in my case, even though I continue to ask for this. Dr. Packer does not follow the standards.
So we're going to ask you to...
You guys need to be accountable for your integrity. Right now, I can't agree with that.
And we're respectful. This is a very emotionally charged subject, but we do need to hold to the time limitations.
If anybody needs copies, I have one.
I want, are we ready? Oh, okay, sure.
It's just been brought to my attention by counsel that, perhaps we can get that door closed, that if you have filed a complaint that's currently pending before the Board of Psychology relating to a particular psychologist, please do not mention that psychologist's name in your testimony. The reason that is because we're the ultimate adjudicators of those complaints, and we can only receive evidence through the process by which evidence is submitted to us. So were you to do that, it could prejudice the determination of the ultimate complaint. Thank you.
I want mothers to have the right to protect their children in divorce courts. According to the, my organization is Protect Our Kids. According to the Protect Our Kids Act, Congress found that deaths from child abuse and neglect are preventable. One way to stop child abuse and child deaths is to stop labeling abuse cases parental alienation cases. The AFCC's mission statement is professionals dedicated to improving the lives of children and families through the resolution of family conflict. I take issue with this mission statement because high conflict, parental alienation, bitter custody disputes are in fact abuse cases. Yet on the AFCC's 60-page, 3-day conference schedule of classes, abuse is not acknowledged, not at all. Yet, according to the United States Department of Justice statistics, the #1 cause of death in pregnant women is homicide. The males that impregnate kill. The #2 cause of death in women is domestic violence homicide. Their male partners kill them. 97% of all violence is perpetrated by males. Yet, there is no acknowledgement of abuse in divorce courts, where abuse is labeled parental alienation. Child abuse is a crime. It is litigated in criminal court under penal codes. But child abuse by a parent laws are different. If there are custody issues, child abuse is litigated in divorce court under family law, where a representation of abuse is labeled a parental alienation case. Abusive fathers are awarded custody, while good fit mothers are often court-ordered no contact or supervised visitation. And supervised visits for none, am I up?
I just indicated to you your time is up.
Time's up, okay, that's
See?
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Is it possible to clarify, and I'm hoping that some of this might happen by way of my question, I think most of us are touched by this testimony, and I'm reminded that this particular way for people to present their concerns is somewhat awkward because we're not allowed to respond or ask questions, and I'm hoping that at some point, if we do put this issue on the agenda, that the same people would come and talk and we'd have a chance to interact. I just want to express the concern that we look perhaps like we have little interest in this, but that's by virtue of how this is being done.
Thank you, Dr. Erickson.
Thank you for opening that up.
Remember, we cannot make comment on the substance of this. Okay, I'm just reminding everybody.
A process. Can we get a copy of what they're reading?
For some people, we have gotten copies. I think they've gotten a little stuck over here, but for some people, we don't have those copies. So perhaps they can submit them to us at a later time.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Tripp, and I am here because I was a parent. I was in the court system for 14 years. My daughter aged out over a year ago. I'm here today because I want to attest to Larry Nicholas, who was the psychologist that worked on my case. We originally had met with him in 2002 when my daughter was 4, and he gave us the psychology test, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and the Rorschach. And about 9 months later, he released the partial report that indicated that her father's results were outside the normal range for the MMPI, and his Rorschach was uninterpretable. However, no red flags were raised. He sent us back to mediation to try to agree. In the meantime, my daughter was on a 50-50 schedule. Larry Nicholas did nothing more until September of 2003, which was a year and a half later, when he was called to court and the judge ordered him to finish his 730 evaluation after he had taken hundreds of dollars from us. At this point, my daughter was already in kindergarten. His response was, she should stay on a 50-50 parenting plan because my daughter was clingy with me and aloof with her father. He completely ignored all of the psychological results. Because of that, my daughter had to spend the next 14 years in an abusive relationship. Her father had a series of relationships with women who he was arrested for domestic violence on multiple occasions. My daughter tried to leave his house at 17 and a half, was sent back. She has not had any contact with her father since she turned 18 and is just now starting to talk about some of the abuse that she put up with. Dr. Nicholas could have ended this all when she was 4 if he had done his job. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
May I ask a question also? I think it would be helpful if we knew what this issue was specifically addressing, I guess is. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know why, I don't know why this is coming up now. So I don't know,
I don't know that there's any way to address that other than to say this is public comment, and whoever wants to make public comment can make public comment.
Okay, so I'll just leave my statement there.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank the board for kindly hearing us today. My name is Jacqueline Kira. Myself and my children, Kennedy and Kurt, have been utterly ravaged by the misconduct of psychologists licensed by the board. On September 10th, 2015, my children, 3 and 5 years old, were ripped from their beds without any notice to myself, a trial, or a hearing. The conduit was a custody evaluator named Janelle O'Donnell that was paid over $30,000 by my abusive ex-husband to write a biased report against me. It detailed a finding by psychologist Penelope McGowan-Ross in Vacaville that stated she thought I would physically harm my children, yet a response to a subpoena for her records stated that she had never met with me or done any evaluations. This was true, yet her opinion was used to take my children. More recently, psychologist Janet Kane in Napa wrote a letter to the family court at the request of my ex-husband. She too has never met with me, yet she is a proponent of parental alienation syndrome, and wrote a letter to the court stating my daughter Kennedy is not doing well in her new custody arrangement with her father. She stated that all she talks about is being back with her mommy. Instead of listening to a little girl who is desperate to be back with her mother, she accused me of being the reason my daughter is longing for me and unhappy with her father. My several phone calls to Dr. Kane's office have never been returned, yet she confidently writes letters of opinion to the court without knowing the full story or even speaking to me once. Without one negative diagnosis or report against me, I have been cut off completely from my two children that I adore. I did not get to see them for their birthdays, Christmas. I'm not allowed to know anything about their doctor's appointments or schooling, all due to an accusation of parental alienation that was assessed without ever investigating abuse. My ex-husband has been arrested for domestic violence. I've had restraining orders, police testimony, therapist testimony, witnesses, confession letters where he detailed the abuse of me and the children. Although it was submitted, none of it was even considered, and my children were placed in the home with the documented abuser. I'm asking the board to ban the usage of parental alienation syndrome in California, and to have a strict policy that mandates a psychologist to be fully informed, especially about abuse, before making any recommendation to a family court. I, as a parent, have been cut off from my children for almost 18 months now, yet I never utter the words parental alienation, because this syndrome takes the focus off of a child's voice and places it onto the parent. I'm here today not for myself, but on behalf of my children and the many others that are begging for someone to hear them and to act on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi. My name is Britt Brown, and I'm from Texas. I'm an advocate against reunification, threat therapy, and hotel rooms. This has been going on since 2004. Randy Rand's license has been on hold or inactive since 2009, and he is still running it. And there are children all around the world that are being kidnapped and sent to California into a hotel room for threat therapy. You heard earlier Ariana testify about what happened to her, and this is happening to children in New Jersey and in Texas and Montana, and all here in California in Mill Valley and Y'all's hotels with Randy Rand, whose license has been inactive since 2009. And he also has taught a life coach, which he is now a life coach. And they're still doing that with Dr. Craig Childress now. He's promoting a life coach to run these hotel reunifications. The unprofessional conduct, like the 2960, 2903, 2960H, 2660I, 2960, oh yeah, that's the same one. Anyways, they're practicing psychology without a license. It's behavior modification, and I don't want to waste any more of y'all's time. I have this, but something needs to be done about it, because it's not just, kids in California, but it's happening in California. And you guys are the only ones who can stop it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this public comment time. My name is Connie Valentine. I'm from California Protective Parents Association. The purpose, Dr. Horn, I'm glad to see you again, is to discuss the abusive practices of certain psychologists in this state. Research shows that adverse experiences in childhood harms children's brains so profoundly that it results in chronic physical disease, chronic emotional and behavioral disturbances, suicidality, along with immense suffering. Research also shows that children hardly ever lie about child sexual abuse, for example. And yet, in family courts, when court psychologists are appointed, they almost always recommend reunification with the abusers. Research further shows that 2/3 of mothers who asked the court to protect their abused children lose custody due to the psychological evaluations ordered by the courts. These practices are guaranteed to raise up a generation of disturbed, ill adults. Our organization has met with the board in the past, trying to create a form or have a form created so that these psychologists will follow the laws and the rules that are written down. We were told that the courts oversee the psychologists, and yet they don't cease to be psychologists just because they're appointed or hired by the courts. This latest scandal of abusive reunification programs is a natural outcome of failure to discipline psychologists at the front end. As a mental health professional myself, I'm appalled at these unethical professionals. We urge you to look into this problem and remedy it as soon as possible. We would love to meet with you for more of a dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sir?
My name is Jeffrey Perry, and I've also been harmed by family law courts. Mine in particular wasn't at the hand of a PhD, but a mediator. So I'll speak to, just in my research and looking into these issues that exist within the family court system, mainly tied to that of the mental health professionals involved in it. And one thing that was of great concern to me was that it appears to me that children are being traded for cash in the form of testimonial fees and evaluations to these PhDs for favorable rulings. And I would ask that this Commission please look into the rate in which the parent who can afford that PhD and psychologist in that case gets that favorable decision. If I believe that's unproportional to times when they actually side with the non-financial party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like we have at least one more person to speak.
Don't worry, I won't open all these up. I just wanted you to have a visual. Hi, my name is Jamie Gay, and I'm a mother to 6 wonderful kids. I have 1 foster son, 3 daughters, and 2 boys. And my oldest daughter came home from a visit, and she reported to me sexual molest. And my current husband and I took her to a therapist. And this is back in 2014. So this went to court. This ended up being muddied and deemed parental alienation, in which Leslie Packer, who we all know from prior news articles from the San Francisco Weekly here, California Family Courts helping pedophiles, batterers get custody. It has been 292 days since I've last seen my daughters. I do get to see them for the first time this weekend, but it took this since March of 2016. She has done everything in her power to prevent me from seeing my daughters. I am an abiding citizen. We donate to our community and to our schools. And all we did was take our daughter to a therapist. They are now part of Rebecca Bailey's reunification program. And now I have to pay an extraordinary amount of fees just to have supervised visits, which wasn't in part of the court order. The courts did order reunification based on Leslie Packer's recommendations, which violates the 3026 Family Code, where family reunification services shall not be ordered as part of child custody or visitation rights and proceedings. And also 3027.5 Family Law, no parent shall be placed under supervised visits or lose custody. And there's a Senate bill that's 792 that supports all of this. And I don't understand why this, and this is major money. It was $45,000 for 3 days for my daughter, I saw, to my daughters to be in Rebecca Bailey's reunification program. They've been there they were there 6 days and have been back several times begging and pleading and requesting to talk to the judge. I just ask for some oversight, and I'm in hopes that this doesn't happen to other families.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Christy Ashley, and I'm here because I've spent 5 years in the family court system based on a false accusation of mental health issues. I'm an unemployed mother of 3. I have 0 restrictions with my older 2 children from a previous relationship based on the false accusations with my 10-year-old daughter. I've been forced endlessly $40,000 in now for therapy, supervised visitation based on this. I have some confusion regarding the DSM clearly states that it can't be used in court, although the psychologists that have to be chosen off the county approved list, which the county also states they do not endorse, although you have to choose off that list. You're pretty much cornered into choosing someone who has a relationship with a judge or an attorney, and it's turned into whichever parent they like more, whichever parent lies first, whichever parent is financially more stable to beat down the other parent. Right now, I've done an intake with a new therapist, and on February 1st, there was a court hearing that I didn't know about. On that hearing, we were set to start therapy, and right after the hearing, the therapist has recommended, based on the only interaction that her and I have had is our initial intake that occurred in early December, and now I've been ordered to do a 7:30 evaluation, or not ordered, but requested by the therapist, and that's something that's $10,000 into an indigent family. If I don't have $10,000, I can't see my daughter, and there's no grounds for the initial ruling by the judge and for the therapists and psychologists to keep antagonizing and frowning upon a family for simply not being able to afford unnecessary services that the courts don't endorse, and it states again in the DSM that it's not to be used in court, and it's destroying families. It's destroying my 10-year-old daughter who's with her abuser.
Thank you very much.
For holding you up. Thank you for letting me be here. I came here to say that my ex's attorney is a mediator, a judge pro temp, and taught law at USC. My ex-husband is a chiropractor, makes a lot of money, so he has 4 attorneys. He wrote an ex parte letter to the Family Court Services, is where the mediators go, and that's not allowed. He asked them in April 7th, 2006 to recommend a psych eval on me. So out of ex parte, he asked them. He then wrote a letter on January 18th, 2007, asking ex parte communications with the administrator of the test, which is a psychologist under your board. So the test was given January 30th, 2007. And it was not given to me until I was in court on May 18th, 2007. I never saw my psych eval. I never saw my ex-husband's psych eval. They handed it to me. I asked for a continuance. I'm a pro per. They said, no, you have a 10-minute break to read all of them. I am not a psychologist. I can't break it down that fast. And it wasn't even supposed to be about the psych eval. It was supposed to be about dissolution of other things. So within his psych eval, he admitted drug use, alcoholism, raping me, according to the definition of Webster's Dictionary, to the psych evaluator. That psych evaluator is a mandated reporter. He did not report this abuse to me from me speaking to him, nor from my ex-husband. The state mandates that anyone, even with alleged domestic violence, may not have custody of their child. Well, in return, instead, I
passed four other psych evals because they didn't like the answer that I kept passing mine. And I passed with above average intelligence and was diagnosed with PTSD. My ex's lawyer in return wrote an order that I am not allowed to get psychological help for PTSD, even though that is what I have.
Ma'am, would you like to summarize your point, because we've run out of time?
So anyhow, on May 18th, 2007, they took my daughter, and I have only seen her for 33 and a half hours. So I wrote to the Board of Psychology 2 months ago, and basically, paraphrasing that we're really sorry, and this sounds like something that needed to have action on it, so on and so forth, but we can't because it's 7 years old. And I know you have to throw away records and documents, at least in veterinary medical, in 7 years, but we're talking about a man who abused me and is abusing my daughter, and you guys are saying, sorry, too late, and I just became privy of his information, so it's very upsetting to me in that manner.
Thank you very much.
If I could just quickly respond to Dr. Horn, that you may have missed my testimony since I was first, but I was very explicit as to why we're here and why this is happening now. We've been in dialogue with your enforcement manager, and these are current issues related to your child custody checklist and the procedures that the board uses in disciplining and opening up investigations for PhD psychologists working in family courts.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Phillips, there's been a lot of comment here today. The board can, if it wishes, talk to your executive officer and determine whether or not staff can, sometime in the future, present to the board its process by which it evaluates complaints that are these kinds of complaints against psychologists. And the board would then have a better understanding of how the staff does process these kinds of complaints and investigates them.
Is there public comment on any other topic? All right, well, there being none, we're going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is a board meeting minutes of November 17th to 18th. Agenda item number 4.
Just following up on Ms. Mark's comment, are we going to ask for that issue to be put on a subsequent agenda?
You might want to remember that for tomorrow as well, so we have multiple places in the market, but something is interesting.
Okay, thanks.
Does anybody have any comments on the meeting minutes for November 17th to 18th? Yes.
Good morning again. I have a few comments I think revisions in the sense of making the minutes a little clearer, I think. So I will give you a line and number, Ms. Everhart. Line 45 on page 11. And where it reads the term used during the telepsychology conversation, I think it's important to add during the August board meeting when public attendees expressed concern. On line 475, page 11, 475. This is relating to the agenda item number 10 and the discussion about the composition and use of subcommittees at 2 people. And the whole idea where it says Ms. Jones was referencing the issue about expediency. It was the telepsychology conversation during the August board meeting. You got that, Ms. Everhart? And in line 493, after transparency, can we add the comment, especially given the work done over a 2-year period? line 512, or let me know when you're done, Ms. Everhart, I'm sorry. At the end of the sentence, been perceived that way, again, given the public feedback at the August meeting. I have a few more, but so I'm sorry to dominate, but if someone else wants it. Page 13, after, on line 570, I think we should have the call to order comment there, because after we came out of closed session, we called the meeting to order. Or did we call it before? I can't remember.
Return to open session.
Yeah, but, yeah, so I think we called the meeting to order earlier for the morning, you know, where we say that the people that are here, the whole call to order say. So you're right, I think it's 565 before we went into closed session. On 590 on that same page, Ms. Jones, and I wanted to add, wanted to discuss the feedback received from Dr. Miguel Gallardo. On that line, currently, there's a period. I think there should be a period after the board. And I think I would like to add, I think this was the content. It was context, rather. Dr. Gallardo asked the board to consider the effectiveness of scheduling. I'll stop for now.
I have a few comments that I'd like to make. On page 27, line 1240, where it says, Dr. Phillips said that he was not sure the governor understood the purpose of the bill. I believe what I actually said was that we had not done a good job of educating the governor as to the purpose of the bill. I hope I didn't question the governor's ability to understand things, but I talked about the general concept of there being an educational effort. So I believe it should read something like, Dr. Phillips said he was not sure that we'd done an adequate job of helping the governor to understand the purpose of the bill. And then I would add the following sentence. He also suggested that we would need to redouble our education efforts should this topic come before the governor again. I'd actually, if we could go to page 42, lines 1913 through 1918.
Once again, on
Lines 1913 to 1918. I think on the final line where he said that they believe they have overdeveloped consciences, we can strike the part which is a part of being a psychologist. And I don't have any further comments. Any other comments in the minutes?
I was trying to share the space. Can we go back to page 15? On line 655, after the clause, the but, as opposed to, instead of saying conclude, I think it should read, but wanted to discuss and felt that the topic had been addressed.
What line was this?
Line 655, sorry. As opposed to saying, concluding the comment, I feel like we had addressed the topic. And 668, we can just strike and just say Ms. Jones nominated Dr. Phillips.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time, please?
Strike said, 668, Strike said she would like to. Ms. Jones nominated. Because I just did it. I didn't say I wanted to. And on 675, after the period, can we please add, but wanted to share this concern that was forwarded to board members. And then the next section I just want to, I feel like it was great minutes, but I feel like we need to add a little bit to the section about the suicide risk assessment section. So on page 16, on line 714, I would strike just. The language was adding. That was the conversation, not just. And then I would start the next sentence, but. And then the end of that sentence on line 716, and said we had a great discussion about the intent and, this is the part I would add, and context of adding a suicide risk assessment requirement. Context. Mm-hmm. Licensing committee members, I think that would more, I think it wasn't just the content, it was the context of why we would want to add that.
I know at some point in that meeting we did talk a bit about content and where, if we were requiring a uniform content across those courses, but I think in this context, you did use the word context.
Yeah, because
that
it was
the
to
idea.
talk about, it was before Dr. Horn got into the details. It was basically introducing it, so it was context that I believe there.
Okay, so just so we're clear, we're dropping the word just from line 714 as a suggestion, and the next line would start, but the licensing committee, so it wouldn't be she said.
I'm sorry, you can take off the but. The but's not needed. Don't worry about adding the but.
Okay, cool.
But just changing the content to the context of adding a suicide risk assessment requirement. And on the next page, on 17, on line 734, because I had mentioned that the Policy and Advocacy Committee had not yet reviewed the language and there might be some feedback. And at that time, I think this is the language that should go in there, and encouraged the committee members to offer feedback. That's what we were doing at that part of the meeting. And then my final one on page 18, line 805, where it says captured the spirit of their conversation. I think it should be changed to say the conversation during the licensing committee meeting in September. Because that's where that conversation took place, and as a committee we discussed it. Thank you for the time to extend. Oh, one last one, sorry. Page 22, on line 1012. Instead of reading Ms. Jones said the board would be the sponsor, I think we need to add the language, if the proposal was adopted by the board, based on staff recommendation. Thank you.
Any other comments of the minutes? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes as modified.
Second.
Is there any discussion by the board? Is there any public comment?
I just want to thank Ms. Everhart. It was a lot of pages when we get to 45, and so please, thank you for accepting those changes. I think you did a great job. Just was to add to it, but thank you so much.
Okay. Ms. Everhart, could you call the roll, please?
Jones.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Horn.
Aye.
Bernal.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Akwe-Vadu.
Aye.
Okie dokie. So we are moving on the agenda to item number 6. Or is it 5? Item number 5, which is the budget report from Mr. Ito.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to kick this one off, and then I'm going to pass it off to Mark, our wonderful budget analyst, who is gracing us with a presentation. So,
good morning, everyone. My name is Marc Ito. I'm your DCA budget analyst. It's great seeing everyone today. Good morning, board president and board members.
So the Board of Psychology has a budget. It says of $5,013,000, and that was the original. However, there were revisions and adjustments, and that was for reimbursements paid out. The statewide pro rata is no longer included in there, so it's been budgeted down to $4,764,000, and that's for this current year. That's the 2016-17 year. And since it's, of course, oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious, when you say that the pro rata has been budgeted out of our budget, so it's been budgeted more directly to the DCA, or?
No, it's just not counted in that. It's taken out after it as well.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So.
Thanks.
Mark will get into a lot of the details in a minute. I'm going to let him cover all the good. I'm going to do the nice overview part, and then I'm going to hand it off to our expert. So since it is our February meeting, our first meeting of the year, I wanted to start off with the legislative, or the budget process, which is also legislative. That way it kind of gives you some context to where we're at, obviously, for the 17-18 year, which is the budget. So. The governor starts off the budget process in January. Of course, DCA and the board work on the proposals long before that, but the governor kind of puts out to the public his budget in January, and that's always required by January 10th, so that comes out publicly. And then the legislature proposes budget bills that will eventually be passed as the final budget in June. So after that is out on the table, the Legislative Analyst's Office, which is a entity with a lot of analysts. They do a lot of fiscal analysis and investigative analysis, and they do an analysis of the governor's proposed budget, so sometimes that'll differ from the departments or Department of Finance's analysis. So it's good to know that there's those two different analyses. The legislative budget subcommittees then start holding hearings. So these are on various changes in the budget change proposals that different agencies submit. We give testimony at those. The subcommittee that hears our proposals is the Subcommittee on State Administration. So those get kicked off in February. I believe we'll probably be in the March later hearings for state administration. And at that time, of course, we'll testify on our own budget change proposals, like our SSM1, Staff Services Manager 1 and 2 positions. And if all of those are approved, they get included in the budget bill later. But those subcommittees, they all hold those hearings, and then those subcommittee hearings go to the main budget committees for a vote. The governor also releases a May revision that includes updated revenue and different information. After the May revision, the legislative budget committees kind of get all of the subcommittees' report and create a final report. They also make respective bills, so there's always going to be an Assembly bill and a Senate bill that are budget bills. So they'll pass their own budget bills essentially in both houses. And they'll hold full hearings on that, of course, to take those votes. And then the budget committees pass those on to their floor, and then once they've gone from the floor, they are usually somewhat different. They'll get sent to a conference committee, which is a joint committee of both houses. So that's where they hash out different details. And then once the conference committee gets done with that bill, essentially it'll be one of the AB or the SB, so Assembly or Senate, and then it'll go to both houses, and they will have essentially a compromise package at that point, and it has to be passed by the legislature by June 15th. And that's now a majority vote, no longer a 2/3 vote, and that's, of course, how we have less delayed budgets nowadays. There used to be long battles, and sometimes the budget wasn't passed until September. So now it's done by June 15th. And then for the 2017-18 year, I believe we are budgeted for $5,019,000. And then I'm going to go ahead and kick this off to Mark, who's going to take us through all these wonderful charts and diagrams.
Awesome. So Sharice did a great job explaining the budget process. Kind of at a high level, the way we do it at DCA is we do incremental budgeting, meaning that we use the prior year's Budget Act, which was approved by the governor, and that's where that $5.013 million that was referenced earlier in the budget materials, that's where that number came from. So we do incremental budgeting, and these incremental changes can be, for example, budget change proposals, budget letters, et cetera, to things that we have to add to the budget. One of those things was the statewide pro rata that was referenced earlier. That was previously part of your budget. It was part of your appropriation. Now, the difference is there's a budget letter. Now, that's going to be taken directly from your fund via a direct draw. So it's not part of your budget, and it's not going to come out of your budget. So it's the same amount, but it's kind of just a different way that they're going to take it, is what it is. So that's one of the incremental changes we made, and that's the significant decrease that you see in your appropriation going from the $5 million to the 4.764 is primarily that's from that statewide pro rata reduction as part of your budget. And with that said, as Sharice mentioned, your budget after all the changes is $4.764 million. And that's included in the governor's budget for this fiscal year. Now, in your package, you have several forms that I'm going to go over. The first form I'll go over is your fund condition. It is this form that looks like this here. Now, the fund condition, the way the fund condition works is it works left to right. Starting in fiscal year 15-16, that's actual data that was that you spent and you brought in from last year. And then in 16-17, that is what's built into your budget, and the out years are based on formula-driven calculations. Now, the first section of the fund condition is the beginning balance. That's what your program's beginning balance was at the beginning of the year. That's how much money is in your fund. And the next section is the revenue and transfer section. That is how much money that your board brought in 15-16, and then from 16-17 on, that's what your program is projected to bring in. And for the expenditures, the same thing. In 15-16, that was your actual expenditures from the prior year. And then from 16-17, that's what's built into your budget for this year, and there's formula-driven calculations for the out years. And then the last section is your fund balance, which is essentially your beginning balance plus your revenue minus expenditures, and then you get your fund balance. And then the last section there is the months in reserve. And kind of an easy way to look at the months in reserve is that's how many months that your board can sustain its current operations if no more revenue was brought in. And as you can see, your months in reserve are on a downward trend. That's because your board has a structural imbalance where you spend more than you're bringing in. So you can see that your months in reserve are going down. However, you guys do have $7.5 million in outstanding general fund loan repayments. And as you can see in the fund condition, 6.3 out of that 7.5 is projected to come out in 18-19. And there's another 1.5 outstanding. I think it's 1.2 actually, or it's still outstanding outside of this fund condition. And with that said, it is it is going to come out in 18-19 at this point, but we do reassess those general fund loans kind of based on your months in reserve. So every year we reassess those, and if we have to push it out or pay those loans earlier, we will definitely do that just based on your months in reserve. So that's something we do every year. So that is your fund condition. I have
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure you've answered this before, but how many months in reserve is considered healthy or appropriate?
Once it gets to to 3 to 6 months, we'll at that point we will kick in that general fund loan repayment typically. But in your case, in 17-18, we're projecting 5.2 at the end of that year, and then the next year we're going to have that loan in your fund is what it's going to add. But that all depends on because your fund condition, and I'll kind of go over it in the charts. Your fund condition shows if you bring in exactly what you project in revenue and if you fully expend your budget. Now, your program, you under-project a little bit in your revenue, so this fund condition isn't in exact science, really. So I think your Munson reserve will probably be greater than the 5.2, and we can kind of go over that when we get to the charts as well.
So, to my question, about 6 months would be considered appropriate.
Yeah, that's when we'll start to look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So the next form I have here is I have two expenditure projections here. As of month 6, the expenditure projection section, I have two of them here, and I'll kind of go over why there's two of them here as well. Now, as of FM6, based on your current expenditures, I'm showing that you're going to overexpend your budget by $15,000. However, there is budget bill language that allows healthcare boards to pursue a current year Attorney General and Office of Administrative Hearings augmentation. And at this point, your program is projected to overexpend those line items. So we're in the process of pursuing that. And we're, at this point, we've kind of, in these expenditure projections, we built in $150,000, $100 for AG, because that's pretty much what you're going to overexpend in that line item, and $50,000 for the Office of Administrative Hearings. So you've kind of built that into your budget. We're in the process of pursuing that. That number may go up and down just a little bit, depending on how FM7 looks and based on your reversion, because you don't want to ask for more than you need to. Like, you don't want to have a reversion that's greater than your AG/OAH augmentation request, because then, the questions are going to come, whether you could have just absorbed that within your existing resources. So that's something I'm working with Antoinette, Sharice and Jason on to kind of come up with an appropriate number, and then we'll move forward with that. So if you have any questions on the projections, I can answer those at this point. Awesome. So with that said, I'll get to the bar charts here. There's 4 sheets. I think one was maybe handed out this morning, I believe. Yeah, okay.
There's a handy underneath your documents.
Okay, so these bar charts kind of tell a story. So the first chart we have is the psychology fund balance comparison, the budgeted is in parentheses. So this chart shows you historically, dating back to fiscal year 2010-11, what your fund would have looked like if you only brought in the revenue that you projected every year and if you fully expended your budget. So this kind of gets into my conversation earlier about how your fund condition isn't an exact science, because you're not always going to bring in the exact revenue that you projected, and you're not always going to fully expend your budget. So as you can see here, there's a significant decrease to your fund balance based on if you were to only bring in the revenue you projected and fully expended your budget. And then the next page is the psychology fund balance with your actuals. So this kind of shows your, dating back to 10-11, how much you actually brought in and how much you actually expended. So you can see that you're still working in a structural imbalance, but not nearly to the level that you would be if you were to only bring in what you projected and fully expended your budget. And then the next chart here is your psychology expenditure comparison, the budgeted versus actual here. This is just showing what your reversion was every year. So this shows what you were budgeted in that top line, what your budgeted expenditures were, and then what your total expenditures were, so what you actually expended for those fiscal years. So as you can see, your reversion has gone down over the years. However, you do have in 17-18, your appropriation does go up for your AG and OAH via a baseline budget adjustment. So that reversion should increase in the outgoing years if your expenditures stay consistent to what they are now. And then the last bar chart here is this kind of just shows what your projected revenue was every year, what you guys projected to bring in is the top line, and the bottom line is what you actually brought in. So there is a difference of anywhere from 100,000 to almost 300,000 every year of under projection. So you guys do bring in more revenue than you're projecting every year. So that's kind of the anticipation moving forward as well, I think.
I'm sorry, I have a
Yeah.
quick question.
Yeah.
In our projected revenues, that's
Yeah.
based on memberships and collecting our, what is it, the fees that we collect from?
Yeah, your revenue, I think a large portion of why you're bringing in more revenue than you project, because there are certain fees and revenue that you bring in that are variable, like your cite and fines and stuff like that. That's very hard to project, so I think that's why. Yeah.
And that would also include things like delinquency fees and additional things like cite and fines and any cost recovery that we get from enforcement cases. So that can vary by year.
So I think there's only one more form. It's the discretionary versus non-discretionary budget items. So with this, so this shows your total budget here, and that says $4.815 million, which is different than what your bottom line budget is, because this doesn't include the reimbursements. This is just showing what your expenditures are. And as you can see, the large majority of your expenditures are non-discretionary, so stuff that you don't have a lot of control over. So I think you guys do a good job with your budget, and considering that there's such a small percentage of expenditure items that are discretionary. So at this point, if you have any questions, I'm be glad to answer them at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ito, for presenting all that you have. And I think you might have just answered the question I was going to ask, and that is, based on all the things that are part of this budget process, income from licensing and other ways that income accrues to us, the expenses we have, the loans to the general fund, which frankly are hard to understand how they move back and forth. I started to ask questions and decided not to, but because I think it's hard to get good answers on how that works, or answers that I can understand anyway.
Yeah.
Overall, are we doing well as a board based on everything that you see? Do you feel like good job, things are allocated where they should be, we're not going to get in trouble? Any recommendations that we should do things differently?
You know, I think you guys do a good job with your budget. I know last year we realigned your budget line items so they more appropriately reflected where the expenditures were coming from. At the Department of Consumer Affairs, at the end of the day, we do bottom line budgeting. You just need to spend within your bottom line appropriation. But that's something we did last year, and that's something I'd be happy to do this year. That's not included in these projections this year, but I can work with Antoinette and Sharice and Jason to kind of to do that if that's something you would like to see in there. But otherwise, I think your budget looks good. Yeah.
Any other questions? Is it going to be the end of the budget report? Because I'll ask for public comment. Or is there any public comment? Well, Mr. Ito, we feel very grateful to have such an expert budget analyst, and we enjoy working with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
We're now going to do the Enforcement Committee report. Welcome, Ms. Monterubio.
Good morning. We're going to start with I'm sorry.
People were just asking when we're going to take a break. I said in approximately 15 minutes because we got a late start today.
Okay. We're going to start with item 6. That is the enforcement report. And attached with the enforcement report, I've included the overview of enforcement activity, which shows the complaints, investigation, and the discipline statistics to date to the current fiscal year. And I also provided a handout of the enforcement performance measures that you should all have. I apologize for it being a hand carry. We just got the final data yesterday about 2 o'clock. The board has hired Curtis Gardner as its new probation monitor. Mr. Gardner was previously employed by the Board of Registered Nursing as a probation monitor. He's responsible for all aspects of probation, including probation intake, scheduling interviews, and responding to all communications from probationers, practice billing monitors, and worksite monitors. Mr. Gardner is also responsible for preparing concise and detailed probation reports. With the hiring of Mr. Gardner, the enforcement unit does not have any vacancies. Since July 1st, 2016, the board has received 657 complaints. All complaints received are open and assigned within 7 days.
Ms. Monruby, I could ask you to pull the microphone a little closer to you.
Yes, is this better? Okay, I apologize. Most complaints continue to be investigated by an in-house enforcement analyst who conduct desk investigations. These investigations include requesting patient release approval, obtaining relevant patient records, written responses from the subject of the complaint, and obtaining an opinion from a board expert. Investigations that require field work, interviews, or a sworn peace officer because of safety concerns or criminal activity are referred to Health Quality Investigative Unit or the Division of Investigation. Since July 1st, the board has issued 19 enforcement citations. Citation fines are issued for minor violations. For example, those include false or misleading advertising or practicing with an expired license. Since July 1st, the board has referred 27 cases over to the Office of the Attorney General for formal discipline. And currently, the board is monitoring 45 probationers. Of the 45 probationers, 7 are out of compliance. So again, I've attached the overview of enforcement activity as well as the performance measures. And if you wouldn't mind, just maybe flipping to the performance measure, just want to point out a few areas. Again, we're always able to hit most of our target dates. Our target date to open complaints are 9 days. We are actually at 7. Investigation target dates is 80. This particular quarter, we were at 89, so we were 9 days over. One of the hardest, I think, target dates to comply with is the 540. That's PM4, formal discipline, and our average was 624, which I'm really proud of. It is still over the 540, but not by a significant amount. We're at 84 days over, so we will again try to work on that for the next quarter and come as close to the 540 as possible. And again, that involves outside factors. That's the AG's office, that's our investigative unit, so that's from beginning to end. In regards to probation, our intake time, our average is 7 days. I'm sorry, the target date is 7. Our actual average is 2 days. And also for probation violation responses, the target date is 10 days. Our average is 3. So in most areas, I think we're doing extremely well, and I'm really proud of the enforcement staff. They work really hard on investigating complaints and following up with the AG's office as well as our investigative unit. Are there any questions regarding my board report? No?
I have one. Thank you for your presentation. What do we do with the 7 people, in this case, that are out of compliance? I believe we've heard from time to time, but I would appreciate just kind of a quick refresher on how the board handles out of compliant.
Sure. It really just depends on what the violation is. An example would be if somebody failed to submit a quarterly report or missed a cost recovery payment. That's a minor violation. It's still a violation of probation. So we will issue citations for those type of violations. If it's somebody who missed a drug test or didn't complete a psychological evaluation within the 90 days, we're going to refer that matter to the AG's office for a petition to revoke probation. So it really just depends, but we do either issue a citation or refer to the AG's office. Sure.
I'm sorry, you said that's 90 days, within 90 days?
Right. The disciplinary guidelines are in your law book. They start on page 497, and one of the terms is psychological evaluation. And in each order, it states that they have to complete that within 90 days of the effective date. So if they fail to do so, that is a violation of probation, and we would refer that matter over to the AG's office.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There are also instances where, under the disciplinary guidelines, we make it a condition precedent to them practicing. In other words, they have to have the evaluation before they can even go back to practicing. And then other instances such as this, where they have 3 months after our order's been issued to get their psychological evaluation.
Correct.
That makes sense?
Any other questions?
I guess the question I had was similar to Dr. Erickson's, in fact, and I guess I understand that process. And then I'm just curious, and I don't know if that's a data point or not, but in terms of those that are out of compliance, so there's 7 in this report, do most of them get back into compliance? And I guess that, I thought that, I mean, I guess what you're saying is that if it's a citation for certain things, but for those, and having read some recent enforcement cases, it gives me the question like, well, then what happens? Do we?
Well, most do come into compliance. And unfortunately, to refer a case over to the AG's office can be timely for a hearing. So we can resolve several of those minor violations through a citation, which could be issued rather quickly, probably within 2 weeks. They're still entitled to an informal conference, of course. They still can appeal our findings. But I think in cases where we are pretty sure we're not going to get revocation, like in a missed cost recovery payment or a late quarterly report being submitted, we're saving on time, we're saving on money, and we're still able to cite the individual for the violation. It shows a record. So down the road, if they were to continue to be out of compliance, it basically would build a stronger case for the board. It would be considered an aggravating factor. So we could show that we've attempted to help them come into compliance. We've already issued a citation, and again, they're in violation in one way or another. Sure.
Is there any public comment on this particular portion of the agenda? I think we're actually going to cut your presentation into 2 parts, one pre-bathroom break, one post-bathroom break, because of the expressions that I'm reading on some of the other board members' faces. So why don't we take a 10-minute break to go to the restroom or get refreshments as we desire. It'd be hard to get started without snake. So we're going to get back to session. Ms. Monterrubio, I think we are, if I understand correctly, on item number 7.
Yes. Item number 7, at our November board meeting, we received public comment regarding concerns on how we issue press releases. As you all know, the board is a consumer protection agency and is committed to protecting consumers of California from harmful licensees and practices. In keeping with our mandate to protect consumers of psychological services, The board may issue press releases involving unlicensed activity, sexual misconduct, revocations, fraud, and criminal arrests or convictions. We work with the Department of DCA's Public Affairs Office and its Legal Affairs Division and the Office of the Attorney General to ensure the information that is being published is accurate and informative. Most press releases are issued once a case has been adjudicated. However, there are instances where a press release is issued due to the egregiousness of the case. For example, cases involving child molestation, child abuse, elder abuse, unlicensed activity, or fraud may warrant immediate notification to consumers of psychological services in California. The board is committed to protecting and educating the consumers of California by providing important information through a variety of ways about providers of psychological services and individuals practicing psychology without a license. You all should have a copy of this letter here. It was a letter that I provided.
The hand carry?
The hand carry. It's a letter from Senator Hill to Ms. Sorek, thanking the board for its efforts in consumer protection and endorsing the posting of arrests in press releases and social media following the filing of an accusation. Any questions on item 7?
I think it's also useful for people to know that if they want to see the nature of the press releases and how often we issue a press release, that there is a, is it on our website? Mm-hmm. On our website, you can actually go to the press releases and you'll find it's very unusual for us, or it's fairly infrequent for us to issue a press release, and it's typically only the most egregious cases.
Correct. If you go to our homepage and click on publications and then click on the press release link, all of the ones that we have issued since 2014 are available to be viewed. And we have issued, I believe it's 4 that are currently on our website right now. The 4 that are issued involve billing fraud, indecent exposure, sexual molestation, and possession of child pornography. Any questions on item 7?
Are there any questions from the board? Is there any public comment? Thank you.
Excuse me, I would just like to thank Ms. Monterrubio for such a wonderful packet of information. Thank you very much. Well done.
Oh, you're welcome. I have one more item. Item 8. That's okay. I appreciated that. That's fine. The last item is item 8, and that is just the mail ballot process overview. I know at our last meeting there was some discussion about the types of cases that we might hold for discussion, so I included just a general overview of the mail ballot process, and I included our hold policy, which I think the board is going to discuss. Just to go over a few things before we get to that, when cases are sent over for a stipulated settlement, it's accompanied by a letter from the Office of the Attorney General recommending why the decision should be adopted. For proposed decisions that are drafted by an administrative law judge, the ALJ will explain the rationale for the decision within the document itself. As a courtesy to the board, staff sends a weekly snapshot to each member once, with every case that's expected to go out for that week. The board is given 10 days to reply and vote, and in one of 3 ways: vote to adopt, vote to hold for discussion, or vote to recuse oneself. A minimum of 5 votes to adopt must be received to adopt the decision, while a minimum of 2 votes to hold for discussion must be received to move the matter to the next board meeting. A vote to hold a decision for discussion means that you either disagree with one or more portions of the proposed action and do not want it adopted as the board's decision, or 2, you have a question or concern about the decision and would like to discuss this matter with fellow board members. Option 2 should be utilized if you believe an additional or a different term of condition or probation should be added or deleted, or that the penalty should be modified in any way. The next paragraph just talks about if a decision were to be non-adopted, we order transcripts. The matter would be referred back to the board to write its own decision. Failure to obtain a quorum will also cause the matter to be non-adopted and moved to the next board meeting. Staff recommends the board maintain its hold policy as 2 members, as it ensures probationers begin their terms quickly, consumers are protected, and the timeframes for case completion maintains the short turnaround.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. That was a great report. And second of all, I want to talk about this requiring 2 votes for discussion, or I guess even 2 non-adopt, right? Or, well, if it's not a majority to adopt. But okay, so the 2 vote hold for discussion. There've been a few times when there's only, I've wanted to discuss something, and because typically I have a real question about the decision that typically, was come to, and I'm not really talking about the stipulated settlements, but, and I was the only one who said I'd like to discuss this, so that meant there was no way to discuss this. And I don't like that. I feel like that is not really doing our job of really kind of looking at this or being able to talk about it, or even raising concerns about maybe some of the things that were found. And so I do realize this delays it a few months. It doesn't happen very often, but I'd like to propose that if one person would like to discuss this, it come back to the board for discussion in closed session. So that's my proposal and my reasoning.
I'd like to add to Dr. Horn's experience, and that is, there have been situations where I've read decisions, and there's a part of the decision maybe even, it may not even be about the disposition, but there's a part of the decision that's an inaccurate statement of the duties of a psychologist or what should be done in particular circumstances. And then I voted to hold, and apparently not enough people voted to hold, or well, I was the only one that voted to hold on that particular decision. So I do think there's a way that in having a policy where one vote for a hold would be sufficient to bring it back to the board, would in some ways make sure that we're really being as careful as possible in terms of what we're signing off on. On the other hand, I can certainly see the advantage of the process moving as quickly as possible for purposes of consumer protection. So I'm of 2 minds as it relates to this, but I have been troubled in a few instances where I got the vote back, I said 1 hold, and it was, I thought there was a fairly major issue that needed to be discussed.
When we send the cases out, we include the mail ballot memo. And on the mail ballot memo, it states if you have legal questions, please contact Noreen. If you have technical questions, please contact the analyst assigned. But these are questions that you want to discuss with the rest of the board, correct? Okay.
If I could just, as a base to this discussion, just refine one of the comments in Ms. Monterrubio's memo. It says a minimum of 5 votes to adopt must be received to adopt the decision. I think what you need is a minimum of 5 votes because that's a quorum of the board, so you need a quorum of the board to act. So according to your policy, if you had 5 people who voted, who submitted their votes, 4 were to adopt and 1 was to non-adopt, I believe then the decision would still be adopted because you have a quorum of the board acting, right?
Right.
So it's just a little bit of a refinement on what Ms. Monterrubio said. I just want to quickly speak to the idea of the issue with public protection. Just, I think with proposed decisions regarding an accusation, there's a different posture than with statements of issues, because statements of issues, the person has not been issued a license yet. So I think the delay in the board acting isn't the same, doesn't have the same measurement as with an accusation.
And I have a question too, though. If to establish a quorum, I mean, obviously it's based on our current board, but if the board were to grow, it would still be a minimum of 2 to hold for discussion?
According to the board's policy.
Correct.
My question, what would it take for us, if we were looking to change it or alter it in any way, what would it take for us to do that?
Well, it's not in statute or regulation that we have to have. It's just our policy that we require the 2 votes.
So we could do.
We can move to do it.
Oh, very well. Thank you. Should this be an agenda item?
It is an
It is.
agenda item.
It is an agenda item.
And I'm going to move right now, and then that way it'll just be more official. I'm going to move that one vote, and so then we can talk about it however we want to, that if one person votes to hold for discussion, that it would come back to the next board meeting and be discussed.
Second.
Ms. Sork, you wanted to make a point of clarification?
I wanted to put out for possible consideration the idea that perhaps while we have a board of 6 members, the board may want to consider changing the policy back to 2 once we have a full complement of board members. So once we have all 9 members, just something to consider, throwing it out there as a possible recommendation.
You're not putting it out as an amendment to the motion, are you?
Just for consideration.
For later on, you mean? I won't accept that.
And thank you, Ms. Sork. I think that's something for us to think about. And then I guess I also am of 2 minds, because I feel like the ones that we have held over and come to discussion where it might have only been 2 folks voting to do that, I feel like the discussion has been a very robust conversation. And so I think sometimes, as your description of this example you just gave, Dr. Phillips, about something you thought was a big issue, and sometimes I think that, well, I know everyone is reading everything, and I think that it could get lost. And I think that I think that the value of one person noticing it, even at the full complement of 9 folks, it might be well worth bringing it. And I think that at least to see if that becomes too much of a log jam for the process. But I do think that I'm thankful that you put this on the agenda last meeting, because I hadn't thought about it in that perspective before, about the fact that when we're not talking to other board members and we're sitting there doing our work, and there's something that comes to mind that you want to come together and talk about it, to have that option with one, it might make a little bit more sense.
And I definitely understand the board's concerns. I think, for an example of today, we had a case that one of you held. We're not going to hear this matter again until June. And so this individual, who should be on probation, will be practicing with an unrestricted license. And I know that all of you understand that. But I think once we have the 9 board members, if it's going to be the one vote to hold, I think the majority of our cases are going to be held, and it is going to impact our performance measures. We're trying to hit the 540 target date the best that we can. And again, I don't want people voting on cases where they have questions or concerns and they feel as though they're being ignored. If I could just ask, do any of you contact Noreen if it's a legal question, or contact board staff if it's a technical question?
Typically for me, in the situations where I've run into this, it's not so much a statement about the law.
Okay.
It's a statement about whether something's an extreme departure, or it's a simple departure from the standard of care. Or it's a misstatement of our obligation. I'm reminded of a case in which the administrative law judge wanted there to be a release of a document when the document had been handed to the patient. It's kind of like, well, we don't have to get a release for that. So there's situations that are maybe not so much. I certainly have asked for legal clarification on a few occasions from Ms. Marks, but these are more questions of, is this really what we want to say? Is this what the board's putting out there as being kind of, because to a certain extent, although I'm not sure that there's any uniform place where these are published, they do kind of guide attorneys in the future as they go through disciplinary cases with us as to what we've considered to be acceptable or not acceptable. And in some cases, if we're making a statement about it, I'd really prefer that not to be part of the quote-unquote precedent for future boards.
And they are published on our website.
Yeah. So that does give me pause, because I know in some of the enforcement cases, we've had attorneys comment on prior cases and findings in prior cases. So I do think it's very important that we be as accurate as possible in terms of the decisions that we render. Is it your estimate, Ms. Monterrubio, that that there's a very high proportion of cases where one person votes for a hold?
Yes, I believe I pulled the stats for the last 13 months, and there was one vote to hold on 15 of the cases.
15 out of a total of
39.
So that would be a lot of holds.
Yes.
Almost 40% of the cases.
Correct.
I get that it's a lot, and I'm sorry, I wouldn't want to make, I mean, there are a lot of things about it that might be problematic. I would definitely like to see how this goes. If I have a technical question, I do ask it. If I have a legal question, I do ask it. That's not at all ever when I want to hold for discussion what I'm talking about. I think you said it more eloquently than I can, Dr. Phillips, but these are real issues that I have concerns about if this goes out, and that's why I want to discuss them.
And if I could ask, are you finding more concerns with proposed decisions versus stipulated settlements?
I don't think it's ever a stipulated settlement that I have concerns about.
Okay, because the stipulated settlements, as you all know, are the cases where the board staff negotiates the terms and conditions with the AG's office, and the proposed decisions are written by the administrative law judges. Okay.
I can't speak to other people's process. I have had problems with stipulated settlements before, where I felt that there were things missing out of the stipulated settlement that would have been important for purposes of consumer protection. So I think I've probably voted hold on some stipulated settlements before as well.
Okay.
But I do think it's good for us to be reminded that if we're going to now adopt this policy, that we're really undertaking that it's a very serious responsibility to vote hold, knowing that it's going to delay the process for protection of the consumer.
Well, and the reason I was asking Dr. Phillips about the stipulated settlements, because I know that there have been times in the past where board members want to see a certain term or condition noted in the order, and it's not that staff didn't ask for that initially during the negotiation process, but through negotiations, sometimes we have to give up certain things to get certain things. So that could be a question that you could direct to the analyst, who would know that, yes, here are the terms that I initially offered, but they countered with this, and this is what we agreed to. And we wouldn't have to hold that case for 3 months for our next board meeting. But I understand what you're saying.
That does not mean the board, however, could not go back to that person and say, we're willing to end it, but you're going to have to add back in this condition.
That's correct.
'Cause I think we've done that before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that, thank you for that statistic, because that gives you something to think about how that would actually be implemented. So my question though, however, is holding it for 3 months. Given the fact that this is in closed session and the closed session agenda item is so broad, what would prevent us from, I don't know what the cutoff would be, but I don't know if we have to say then it would automatically be a 3-month holdover, or am I wrong? Because we have the closed session to deal with disciplinary issues in the Broadway. We don't put the names of those folks in there anyway, so.
No.
Have a meeting, you mean, and.
No, I'm saying.
Over the phone, say?
Well, no, I'm saying, 3 months, because I don't know which one was the hold for the one when we voted. I can't remember, sorry. If it was done in December, it's quite possible it could be held today, because we don't have to wait. And actually, our next meeting isn't June, it's a April
21st.
So I think also that, it's a total out-the-box kind of way of thinking about it, but I don't think we have to automatically assume that it's 3 months, because we don't have to notice those items, although that would be crazy, but we get lots of hand carries anyway. But I'm just saying that we don't have to wait like in a routine way, do we?
We always have closed session on our agenda no matter what, just to account for some unexpected things that might need to come and be discussed in closed session with the board members. So yeah, we always will continue to include closed session on our agendas, and that's a good point. I think when Ms. Monterrubio says 3 months, that's typically how often we meet, or the time in between meetings. So while we do have a teleconference in April, we kind of put that in just in case for legislation that we would need to address things before committee deadlines. But normally we would have been, February to June, so.
Right, and that is exactly what I meant. I mean, I know that committee meetings can be canceled. It's happened. So our board meetings quarterly, as you know, and so we're guaranteed to hear those cases at least during those closed session periods.
Also, back to the point that was made regarding when we're in full, when the board is in full complement, going back to the two-person hold. The question is, when we were a full board, when we had all 9 members, how often did we get at least 2 people wanting to hold orders? I know
I'm sorry, I don't
that's
have
okay.
that
I know
information. I just pulled the last 13 months. I can look into that for you, and I could report to the board at our next meeting, April 21st. I'm happy to do it at that time.
Because at one time, I know all of us probably have wanted to hold over.
Sure.
But I was just curious. But where I was going with that is here. I think it would be wonderful to put that in the motion now to when we get back to a full board to resume the two-person.
I wouldn't think, I'm not going to accept that amendment to my motion. If we want to reconsider it when we get back into full board, but I don't want to automatically tie us to that. If we just think back the last time we actually got to talk about a case, I know I've been a hold for discussion since the last time we talked about one in closed session, and I don't remember when that was. I know we've done it, but I don't remember when that was, and I know I've been the only one on the times I've held. So since then, so I don't want to have us automatically go to 2 when we have a full complement of board members. So if you want to make a separate motion about that, okay, but I don't want it part of this motion.
Oh, I have a couple of.
I want to vote on this motion.
I have a couple of questions. Well, I don't think we ought to complicate it by going back to 2 if we get more. The math doesn't work right in my head, and we're able to make motions anytime we want to change things. I mean, let's do it later if we need to on that, would be my opinion. But as for the specific motion, am I understanding that anything we vote on, if everyone but me votes to adopt and I say hold, then it's not adopted? We have to wait till any one person saying hold?
No, it's adopted.
It's adopted.
It's adopted, and
So-
it doesn't come back for discussion.
If I put hold, though?
Correct, if you were the only person.
But if we do your motion, though? I
Yeah,
get it down
you're
to-
asking what happens under the motion.
Yeah.
If the motion were to be adopted, what would the effect be?
That nothing would go through if there's anyone that wants to discuss it.
Correct.
I'm a little concerned about that, and it might work. I think if I look at my own thinking in voting on this over the years I've been on the board, I didn't think about the ramifications in the past. I might have had a legal concern, and I might have written down, let's talk about this, and maybe we did, maybe we didn't. So if we do this, I'm going to be thinking, have I really checked with Noreen? Have I checked with staff to make sure that I can't get my issue squared away there before I put the poison pill, so to speak, on hold for discussion? It seems to make sense to me to think of it that way.
I totally agree. I think that's a good idea. I mean, to think about the reason we want to discuss it is because there's something important here. We just want to, it's substantive, and we want to make sure that the board has a chance to talk about it. So I totally agree with that.
I also just wanted to clarify, I think maybe Ms. Monterrubio made this clear. I'm not sure that when she's talking about 3 months, that is generally the distance between cases, but that would kind of assume that a decision is received by the board right after like this meeting, and then it would be that long period of time, and then there are cases obviously that come in all throughout that time.
And I think also that I'm thinking about it, I think the comment that Ms. Monterrubio made about stipulated versus the other decisions, which the title's coming out of my head right now.
Proposed
Thank you,
decisions.
proposed decisions, couldn't come. I think that, and I think you're right, we have looked at some of those that were stipulated, but I do think it would be interesting to then put that real thinking cap on to see if you have, what does it mean, the difference between the two. The fact if you have questions for Noreen, talking to the analysts would be really important, because that would be interesting to see which ones are the ones that people really are having a question about.
I think we're also going to be able to see, if the motion is adopted, how much impact this really has. I mean, if we end up with 22 cases at the next full board meeting that are on a hold, then we may want to rethink the motion or add a third day to the meeting. The other thing I wanted to mention was this doesn't always hurt consumer protection. In fact, putting a hold on a case in which a licensee's been vindicated, where you still have reservations about the vindication, may in fact mean that we may be enhancing consumer protection by holding it and having further discussion regarding it. It does, however, have an impact on the licensee. Obviously, they stay in limbo for longer, so that's a countervailing consideration. Is there any more board comment or discussion on this motion? Do we have any public comment? Hearing none, Ms. Everhart, could you please call the roll?
Jones.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Warren.
Aye.
Bernal.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Akwebadu.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Monterrubio. As always, it was a delight to hear your testimony and to see how well prepared we were for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving to item number 9, an overview of the legislative process. You'll notice we have audiovisual aids available to us for this purpose. So for those board members that aren't able to see the screen, they may want to move to temporarily move to a locale where they can see the screen.
Oh, yeah, if you wanted to go down in front, you're able to as well. Okay. You should move your head, yeah.
You like my
We don't want to see the little bump in the bottom. It's very pretty in there.
I think the silhouette looks good.
Good to go. All right. So, agenda number 9. The overview of the legislative process. Again, it is February. It's the beginning of the process. It was a great time to go over it, have some talking points. This one, I'm going to go through the legislative process in general, DCA and the board's roles, and then a wonderful little Venn diagram of kind of staff and board roles, so you can see kind of how we run our process. So it's very transparent. So hopefully, if you have any questions, I am here for answers, and I'm just going to steal some spots over here. So we're going to talk about DCA, the board, and the legislature, terms and definitions. We call them the cast of characters because everybody plays a role in this big, long process, and sometimes hectic. The legislative process in general, major legislative deadlines. You'll notice we try to have meetings throughout the year, and we have the teleconference, and a lot of that is based on the legislative deadlines. And then the board's legislative process and a time for Q&A in case the board has any additional questions. So I wanted to start off with DCA, the board, and the legislature to kind of give the context. So boards and bureaus are under the Department of Consumer Affairs, which is under a control agency, which is Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, and we're all under the governor. So if you think about this, we're part of the administration. We are not part of the legislative branch or the judicial branch, so we are part of the administration, but we are quasi-independent. So bureaus are not. They have to go through DCA if they want action taken, but because we are a board, we are authorized to be quasi-independent. So that's how we take positions on legislation. We can also sponsor bills. But there are other times when we're using state administrative processes, which are like the regulations we adopt, that has to go up through that system. So DCA has to review our regulations along with our control agency. And so it goes up through that administrative function right there. So DCA and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, they're kind of like our control agency, and they review things. We always have a lot of DCA folks that review our agendas, they watch our meetings, they check in with us, and we work very closely with them on a lot of our administrative things like regulations. And then you got the legislative branch. Obviously, they have this wonderful building, and you'll notice there's red and green. There is a purpose to that. The red, you can see, is on the carpet. The same thing is on their floor. So red carpeted is the Senate, and green carpeted is the Assembly. So if you see red and green, that's usually why. And so what their function is in relations to our board and for DCA is they appoint board and bureau members. They have one member on each. They appoint one. They also have oversight of DCA and the boards and bureaus, and that's through the sunset process. So DCA every year goes before the legislature in the business and professions committees, and they talk about what they're doing, how their progress is. Just like our board did last year, we went through the sunset process where they asked us a lot of questions. How are we doing on our goals, on our measures, on our strategic plan? Are we meeting our consumer protection mandate? And then they reauthorize us for another certain time. So that sunset process is their way of looking at us and evaluating how we're doing and what we're doing. They also are the same committees that every bill has to go through. So if it's going to affect business and consumer affairs, it has to go through the Business and Professions Committee. So all of those policy mandates that end up in statute go through them as well. So that's kind of their role. We do have to go through the legislative process, but you don't have to go to the Business and Professions Committee. If we wanted to sponsor a bill, we can go find an author. But they are, they're our oversight, and we try to have a very good working relationship with them. So we do go to them a lot. We talk with them often. If they have questions, we're there to answer them. Obviously, we have to answer and have a lot of dialogue during the sunset process, and they're helpful in that as well. So I wanted to give you this one to kind of give you the idea of how DCA is structured. They have a lot of different programs. We had somebody from budgets here earlier. They have the legal, they have a legislative and regulatory unit, and they of course look at laws and regs. When they do an analysis, that's from DCA's perspective. So it doesn't always have to agree with us. We as the board may disagree with DCA at times. That can happen. But they're the agency. So they're representing the agency and the administration, and so sometimes we're going to be representing the board's opinion, and that may sometimes differ from DCA's. But again, lots of different units. If this could be super long, you'd also see bureaus have a much more straight upwards. So again, we're quasi-independent, but bureaus are not. They have to send everything through the laws and regs, and DCA administrative functions have to come through there. They don't get to take positions on bills. They tell DCA what they think is going on with the bill, and then DCA takes a position. So those are kind of the distinctions right there, and good to think about.
Ms. Burns, so the top circle, the one with the yellow around it, that it represents agency?
That's the governor.
That's the governor. So shouldn't it be agent? Oh,
so the governor is at the top because he's the administration.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
And then, of course, is our agency, DCA, and then there's all of us. Okay. BCSH is the Bureau of Consumer Services and Housing. Sorry, Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. So it's us, and then there's DCA, and then there's BCSH, and then there's the governor. So just again, providing context. And major terms, we actually have a handout inside of your book, your binders. So it gives you kind of the overview. The assembly, that's the lower house, so they have smaller districts, so they represent fewer people, and there's more of them. The Senate is the upper house, so there are fewer of them and fewer districts in the state of California. If you look at the handouts, you'll see there's 80 members in the assembly, and they represent about 465,000 people each. And then members in the Senate, there's only 40, and they represent 931,000. So bigger constituencies, smaller constituencies, and those are obviously decided by, I believe it's the Redistricting Commission. So an author, of course, that's a member. So bills come out and they are either authored by a legislator or a senator or assembly member or a committee. So like the Business and Professions Committee can author bills as well. But either way, they are always authored. The author is the member or the committee. Sponsors, on the other hand, can be anyone. It could be us if we're sponsoring a bill. It could be any other advocacy group that came up with the language or that is advocating for that bill. And there are authors that do not like working with sponsors. That's also something that some of them do. They like the freedom of not having sponsors, not having vested interest in their bills. So that's always there. Legislative staffers, those are all the wonderful staff that support them, and we work closely with a lot of them. We tend to get questions from them from time to time. They'll submit things to either DCA or us, asking questions, learning the process, and that kind of stuff. Legislative counsel is the legislature's team of lawyers. These are lawyers that craft all the language. So even if we think we've wordsmithed language or some other group has wordsmithed language, legislative counsel is the legislature's lawyers, and they're reviewing the statute, and so their preferences in wording are usually what gets taken into account from a legal perspective. Stakeholders are groups and individuals that have an interest. That's everyone, including individuals, advocacy groups, education associations, psychological associations. Those are all different stakeholders. And then House of Origin, it's going to be used loosely, but it's the first house. So if it's an assembly bill, the assembly is the House of Origin. If it's a Senate bill, it's the Senate. That's the House of Origin. And that's going to be helpful when we talk about legislative deadlines, because there are some deadlines in there where it has to get out of that House of Origin if it's going to keep going. Otherwise, the bill dies in the process. The second house is obviously whichever one it wasn't the first.
Ask a question. Does it keep the same number then and identification regardless of?
Yes.
Once it's out of the?
Absolutely. It always stays an assembly bill or a Senate bill. And it'll keep that number. And every 2 years, they restart the numbering process. So every legislative session is 2 years. So we're in the first year. This is a 2017-2018 legislative session, and they start off at 1 at the beginning of that session.
So if a bill were to leave one house and go to the other, let's say it started in the Senate, so it was SB XXX. When it got to the Assembly, they would still be considering it as SB XXX?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It'll always be heard as that.
Hi, quick question. So when you said, though, it's got a timeline?
Yeah.
Who moves it along, or how do we make sure it moves along?
I'm going to get to that in just a second, actually. Got some diagrams for you, so we'll show you how that goes. And then, of course, let's see, enrolled. So once both houses take action on a bill and it is passed, it is enrolled and sent to the governor. Sometimes it'll say engrossing and enrolling. Sometimes there's technical grammatical fixes Leg Council needs to do, but enrolled means it's on its way to the governor. Chaptered means the governor has signed it or chose not to sign it and it's still becoming law, so it is chaptered. Each of those bills that passes gets a number. So that chapter number in the past, you can look it up. Chapter number 24 of statutes of 2013. You can look that up, and that'll always be that bill language. So even if that code section changes, it's always got that record of what the bill was originally, what that language was originally. That's also where you would find intent language in the past. So that's another thing to know. And then urgency clauses, I don't think we use them as often, but urgency clauses means that I want this bill to become law as soon as it is signed. It has a higher vote threshold, so that's usually something to think about. But urgency clause means it needs to take effect immediately. So sometimes something comes up, an emergency situation, a disaster, and they need legislation to authorize money or some other funds. They're going to put an urgency clause in there. That way, as soon as it gets to the governor and it's signed, all of that takes effect. So that's the urgency clause. And so these are all just good terms to know and have with you. So the cast of characters. You've got the legislators, obviously, the Senate and the Assembly there, the red and green. And then you've got their legislative staff. These are staff of different sizes. They've got staff up here in the Capitol. They've also got staff back in their district offices that do a lot of constituent work. They do a lot of the hands-on work with the constituency, including setting up meetings in the district and those kind of things. Stakeholders can be from any walk of life, including individuals, groups, and that technically stakeholders can also be us at times. And then there's, of course, the governor's administration. The governor always has different positions. He checks in with all those agencies like the Department of Consumer Affairs and Business and Community Services. And then there's constitutional offices, kind of like the insurance commissioner. So those are constitutional officers, and they have separate kind of funding and their own authority. And then, of course, there's independent boards like ours. So probably a little easier to see on your thing, but this is the general legislative process the legislature goes through. It's very similar every time. A legislator sponsors a bill. They take an idea, it can come from anywhere, and then they send it to Leg Council to draft that language. So anytime they have intent language, I think this is what it should say, it goes to Leg Council. Leg Council develops the bill, sometimes even helps them decide where in the code it should go. And then that gets, technically there's a tiny little spot in there, in between there where it goes to rules, and rules decides, oh, this bill affects this topic, and this topic, then it goes to these policy committees. And it has to go through those policy committees before it goes to fiscal. So that first stop there is the policy committee review. Each policy committee has staffers, they do an analysis, they'll often contact the sponsors of the bill, the opposition to a bill can submit letters and provide input, and that committee analysis goes to all the committee members. And it can raise questions, it can show the opposition's arguments, it can also bring up questions if there's technicalities that the committee staff, they're usually longer-term staff members with more policy expertise, they may have questions about the relevancy, why are we doing this, what about adding this type of professional to it. That's where they ask those questions, they vet out the policy in those policy committees. Once they pass it, it then can go to the fiscal committee. If it doesn't pass the policy committee, it stays. So sometimes an author will hold it. Sometimes the policy committee's not going to send it out. Sometimes, back in the past, the policy committees also put in their own little snag of if it costs too much money, we're going to put it on our own suspense file and wait until closer to the deadline to vet out which of these that cost us so much money is good enough to get out. So that used to be Vasconcelos a long time ago used to use it for education. If you're going to cost this much money, I'm not even going to let you out of my policy committee until I take all of the ones that cost us money and vet out which ones I like the most. Not him personally, but the committee. Then you go to the fiscal committee. And again, that committee is going to do an analysis. They're going to look at the costs. Department of Finance and agencies are going to contribute. What does it cost? What do we think it costs? Other people can contribute that as well. Pretty much you're going to get presentations just about the fiscal. They don't want to hear the policy there. They just want to know how much it costs and is it worth the cost that it's going to do. So once you get through appropriations, you can go to the House. But you'll notice sometimes in our legislative briefings, you'll see suspense. So when something gets stuck on suspense, the Appropriations Committee says, you've hit this threshold of this much amount of money. We're going to hold you. And then we're going to look at you all in one big group and say which one of yous that cost so much money is going to get out. Kind of what's the best ideas of these most expensive ideas, and then they let them out. So oftentimes you'll see bills that have opposition or an agency doesn't think they want it out, it costs too much to them, and that's how they do that. So, and then it goes to the floor. And of course, once you get to the floor, everybody gets input. There's a floor analysis that's done. The minority caucus also usually does an analysis for their members, and they have a full vote on the House floor. And I'm going to switch this over to, I forgot to advance ourselves, but again, everybody's in part of that. That first House of Origin, that's the process. You can hit multiple policy committees, but once you get to the House floor and you get a vote, that secures your bill moving along. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but there's deadlines. In a 2-year session, a bill that's introduced has to get through the House of Origin and at least get parked in the second house if it wants to stay in play in the second year. So usually you're going to try and pass your bill in 1 year, but in 2-year sessions, you have an option of having a 2-year bill, but only if you get to the second house. So that's kind of an important matter to know, is you have to get through to a certain part of the process before you can become a 2-year bill even. Otherwise, you could die at the end of the year.
So you can get stopped?
Absolutely. You can get stopped at any point. Absolutely. So some controversial bills never even make it to policy committee because the policy committee had so many questions that the author said, whoa, I'm going to hold this, and it's just going to sit here. Now, remember, of course, they're the lawmakers. They make their own rules. They also get to break their own rules. They also can apply for rule waivers, and suddenly a bill that's made it nowhere can pop out of there and suddenly get really fast committee hearings. But generally, this is the process. There's deadlines. That's how that goes. So, and then, of course, the second house, obviously, we assumed Assembly bill first and then Senate bill. But so second house, whichever one it is, same process. The Rules Committee says, which policy committees does this need to be heard by? It can include multiple or even just one. It really depends on the bill and how many subject areas it hits. So again, the policy committee does this. They do their review. People come and testify. If it passes out of policy, it goes to their fiscal. Remembering that this is in a calendar year, as you're progressing through the year, questions about how much something costs, whether or not an agency now has had more time to review it and now they think there is a significant cost, that can happen in the second house, where previously we weren't sure what the cost was, and now that we know more of the details, now we know more what's going to cost. And so suddenly you could hit the fiscal snag in the committee in the second house that you didn't hit in the first. But just again, kind of giving us the process. Once you get through fiscal committee, you go to the House floor. That vote will happen there. There's the reminder that in each of these committees, they can bring up questions, amendments. A policy committee could make you say, they could say, you know what, I don't like where this is going. I think you need to work with the opposition until you come to an agreement. Bill could change tremendously in the second house or at even every stop in the process, okay? When it does that, when the bill that the assembly floor voted on is significantly changed or changed at all, it has to have a concurrence vote. So the Senate will pass it, and then it'll go back to the assembly, and they will say, do we agree with the changes that have been made over time? Sometimes somebody put in there a poison pill. Sometimes whatever amendment they took now has some significant opposition. That can happen. So, but generally it's coming back for concurrence. If it still has the same amount of support, if the policy is still considered good by most of the House, it gets passed.
Does the language have to be the same language?
It does in order to go to the governor. So that's why after the second house is done, if there were any changes in the second house, it has to go back to get that vote so that the Assembly and the Senate have voted on and approved the same bill with the same language. And then, of course, once it is enrolled, so both houses have passed the exact same bill, it heads on over to the governor. So the governor, during session, has 12 days to sign or veto a bill. At the end of session, which is when most bills get enrolled, they mostly make their way slowly through the process, and the very last month of session is when they get passed. Then the governor has 30 days. So we'll show you the legislative deadlines, but it's generally a longer period at the end because there are hundreds of bills working their way through the process, and they can vote on hundreds in the last week. So it can become quite a logjam at the end, and then he chooses which ways he wants to do it. Sometimes he'll do full days of just education. Sometimes it'll be a variety of issues. It just depends on how he wants to take them. And of course, all of his agencies are providing him with input. DCA, Department of Education, they're all writing their own analysis saying, we agree, we don't agree, we think you should sign, we think you should veto. Those are all going to him, and Governor Brown loves to read them. He's very thorough. Including reading their veto messages, which is kind of exciting if you're the one writing it, obviously. Yeah, at the end of session. So at the end of session, they have 30 days. And again, if the governor doesn't take action, it becomes law. So it used to be a while back a pocket veto. He just sat in his pocket. I don't want to vote on it. I don't want to sign it. I'm just going to leave it, and it would die. It now is a pocket sign. So you either take action or you don't. And if you don't, it becomes law. So then we get to this one. So this is kind of, the green represents boards and general options. So obviously our program or our board would identify an issue. We decided that something was such an issue that we should propose legislation. Board staff would present the issue to the board for approval, and then board staff would seek a legislative sponsor to carry a bill. That can either be we go to the Business and Professions Committee, or we go to an author that expressed a desire, or we just know that that author is like, that's their issue. They have been the champion of that issue for years, and they'd be the person to go to. Either way works. You can go to the committee, you can go straight to an author. Either way you find a sponsor, they go ahead and take that language and send it to Leg Council, and then they send it through that process. What's important to know is all along the way, your staff, Jason and I, are doing a lot behind the scenes. So we're presenting policy concerns and issues to the board for support and opposition. So obviously at the Policy and Advocacy Committee, we give you an analysis. You guys take a look. The board staff present that at the committee, and then the committee presents it to the full board, which is where our board takes a position. So sometimes in the first house, we may not have been able to get a position approved yet before it's even gone through the policy committee. So we try to get these things done quickly, but sometimes that bill's already heard and has moved on to fiscal by the time the full board gets to take a position. But every time they're going to watch this, they're going to take notes. If we have an approved position, we're going to send a letter to that policy committee. We'll be willing to answer any questions that we can for the committee if they have any. I can tell. Go ahead.
I do have a question. Yeah. I thought you said earlier, I might have heard it wrong, that the board can sponsor a bill, but what I'm hearing you say with this is that if we have an idea for a bill, we take it to someone to sponsor it.
They author it. We can sponsor it, they have to author it.
Okay.
Yeah, no advocacy group or sponsor can just bring a bill to the legislature without a legislator. So you have to get somebody willing to author for you. So sorry if that wasn't completely clear. We can sponsor, but we can't author a bill. We can't say, this is made by the board and here's our bill. It can be we're sponsors, but it'll still have that member's name on it. They're the author. They're going to present the bill. And it's also important to know on both House floors, no advocacy groups can be on that floor. So that is your only voice on the House floor.
Have we recently, like sought an author for any bills we have?
That'd be our suicide risk assessment.
That's been the only one?
Yeah, well, I'm newer, so I would defer on how before then.
We have made some changes to the Practice Act over the last 3 years since I've been with the board. We worked with Eggman's office on an exempt settings bill. We were the sponsor. She was the author of the bill. That would make it so that individuals that were providing psychological services could only do it for 5 years without a license under the supervision of a licensed psychologist. So that's something that was recently changed. We initially had that an initial license was based on someone's birth date, and it was a prorated amount of time for their initial license issuance. So it could be a year and a half, could be 2 years, just depended on your birth date, which we felt was unfair. So we sought an author, and that was Assemblymember Baker's office, and they authored that bill. We were the sponsor. We made that change. And then Assemblymember Levine's office, we had the verification of experience statute that was changed to allow us to receive the experience in a signed and sealed envelope from the applicant versus having the supervisor send it and getting it piecemeal. So those are, at least over the last 3 years, those are 3 bills where we have sought an author and sponsored the bill.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. And then, of course, along the way, we're always taking, we're tracking the bills, we're taking notes on the floor votes, and we're reporting back. So you'll notice at all of our board meetings, they have the legislation, and inside the memo, it'll tell you what's going on. Where's the bill at in the process? Has it changed a lot? Obviously, it's if it's been significantly amended and we think that changes the board's position or could, we'd be asking for an amended vote. Or here's the new language. Are we still sure we support or oppose or support if amended? And we keep checking in throughout that process because, again, it can change the language all the way through the process. And then, of course, it repeats in the second house. And we're watching these committee hearings. We're taking notes. What are the people saying? Are we worried about things that might affect the board that maybe previously the intent didn't seem like it was to change something, but now it does? We would keep coming back to you with all of that. Of course, we'd also follow that concurrence vote. That's pretty important as well. Things can always die along the process. And then, of course, all the way through, if we have an approved position by the full board, we are sending letters of support or opposition or asking for amendments in that process. And that's always in accordance with what the vote was. So we're following board direction that whole throughout. And then, of course, we send one final one to the governor, and that's usually a we urge you to veto or we urge you to sign. So if we had a support or support if amended, it's going to be an urge to sign. If it was an oppose or an oppose unless amended, it's going to be an urge to veto. And then we definitely want to have those, they're position letters, essentially, but there are advocacy to the members and to the governor on our positions as the board. And so there's a lot of deadlines in the process. Of course, they can break their own rules, but that's usually not something you want to be seeking or be subject to, because a lot of times that's when people are sneaking things in. So the last day to submit bill requests to Legislative Council this year on the first session was January 20th. So if you wanted a bill to be drafted, it had to be to Leg Council by January 20th, which seems really early in the process, but again, it's a very tight timeline throughout the year. So generally, if you want legislation passed, you need to be on it in November, December. That way it's ready to go, if not already sent to Leg Council in December. So the last day to introduce bills is actually coming up. That is next Friday. Oh, thank you. Next Friday, February 17th. So the bills have been slowly trickling in January, and this week and next week there will be a slew of bills. Of course, they have to get drafted by Leg Council, and introducing of the bill is actually done by the member. They come up on the House floor and introduce their bill, gets a quick summary, and then the bill can be active. Each bill that's introduced, though, has a 30-day kind of cooling off period. So it gets introduced, and then there's 30 days where it can't move. Can't go to a policy committee. It just has to be out for the public to see. So that's also good to know. The last day for policy committees to pass fiscal bills. So that's really important because then they obviously have to go to that fiscal committee. That's the first hurdle you have to pass, and that's April 28th. So you notice these are coming up pretty quick. April 28th is in the first house, and then that second house is July 14th. So April and July, it's got to move past that policy committee if it's got a fiscal impact. And then, of course, for the non-fiscals, it's about a week later or a little bit. So May 12th or July 21st. So, and those deadlines get pretty tight. It's hard to get past them. The last day for fiscal committees to pass a bill for this year is May 26th. And then in the second house is September 1st. So again, they have to hit those hurdles along the way in order to keep proceeding. So you have to get past the policy committee, and then you have to get past the fiscal committee. And then once you're over to the next side, it's the House of Origin deadline. And I want to put this in reference. The House of Origin deadline in the first year is critical for your bill to get passed. So you have to get past that House of Origin and into the second house. And so that's a floor vote to get you to the Senate or the Assembly, whatever that second house is, in order to stay active. And that's important because in a 2-year process, the first year, you can become a 2-year bill, but only if your bill got past that House of Origin deadline. So, and in the second year, you're out of luck. You have to hit that deadline. It has to be hard and fast. There is no 2-year bill in the second year. So good to know that part. And that deadline is 6/2, so June 2nd. So that'll come rather quickly, where it has to already get out of that first house in June. Then there's a spring-summer recess. It's summer for this year, and obviously the deadlines are different, but July 21st through August 21st, the legislature takes a break. The members go home to their district. Sometimes there's informational hearings or investigative hearings that get held during this time. Staff are usually working together to get anything ready for the next push, because the last part of session is going to go fast and furious. Things are going to get amended. Things are going to happen quickly. So that's kind of like a prep and ready for that next big push. And then the last day to amend bills on the floor, so that's in that second house. Last day to amend that is 9/8, so September 8th. So after that, things can't be amended on the floor. I mean, unless you get a rule waiver, obviously. There's always that caveat. And then there's the floor session only deadline. I didn't have it on here, but it's good to know that they're not supposed to, and I say supposed to because it's, again, their rules, their game. Floor session only from September 5th through September 15th. So if they're having a committee hearing, it is ad hoc, really fast. They just got a rule waiver on the House floor. They're sending it to committee that day, and it's going to go extremely fast. So we might hear the bill's going to amend, we got to send it there, and it's going to be there today or tomorrow. So that's when it gets a little fast and furious at the end. And then the last day for bills to pass on the floor is September 15th. So if those floors don't pass those bills by, usually it's midnight on that day, on September 15th, the bill has died. Okay? And then the last day for the governor to sign is, of course, 30 days after that, October 15th. So even during that last phase, after the legislature's taken action and they pass the bill, and we think that's great, and we say support, that last month of getting those policy recommendations to the governor, you know, if we opposed it, we urge a veto. Here's why. This is why it's so important that you veto this. There's still that one last check, that one last opportunity for advocacy. But that one last opportunity, everybody else gets it too. So the agencies get it, all the stakeholders, everyone's sending in their letters, and then the governor weighs all the options. Yeah.
Is there a real-time tracker on the SBs and ABs? And
Absolutely. So legislative info, it's a website. You can always track it. Anyone in the public can set up an account and track bills. It'll even send you an email every time it's voted on, anytime it amends. We also have tracking software that's separate, but anyone in the public can. So say you as a private citizen want to know bills on animal welfare. You could sign up on legislative info and say, I want to know what bills are there, and you subscribe to it. It'll tell you every time it's amended, every time there's a vote. It'll tell you where it's at in the process. You still need to know the process, because it's not going to tell you that, but it'll tell you each time it changes. So then we get to the board's process. So this is our internal part. And I happen to love Venn diagrams, so this is our process. So every time we take a position, it's usually gone through a board committee first and then to the full board. So staff is going to use our professional knowledge and expertise to draft legislative analyses or legislative proposals. So analyses are of other bills that we didn't sponsor, and proposals are ones that the board would like to sponsor. And we put those up for board consideration. Usually, we've had them all in the board committee process potentially for a long time. So sometimes they've been in the licensing committee for a while as an issue, and then they decided we'd like to do legislation. Then we've conferred with the policy committee. And during those times, that's when you guys are sitting there using your committee's expertise. So your subject matter expertise, including committee actions, campaigns that we've heard from, surveys, studies, different things the committee's done over time, and all of the committee's findings to evaluate the merits of the draft proposal. And I don't have that in there, but also legislative analysis. So the policy the policy committee is going to take a look at the board staff's analysis of a bill and say, okay, I think I agree with you, or maybe we don't. And maybe the policy and advocacy committee is going to say, no, I think we need to change that position to that. That's obviously the first public airing, because all of our board committee meetings are public for our standing committees. And so that's going to get the first airing of what the board staff have input in, what are the proposals, and then that's going to go over to the full board. And obviously at these meetings, and that's where the full board's going to consider the recommendations of the committee. They're going to use the collective personal and professional knowledge and past experiences on the board, including past board actions. Oftentimes we've looked at past board meeting minutes, past board conversations, past board actions on the same issue, different campaigns that other committees have done, surveys, studies, other findings, and you're all going to use those to evaluate the merits of that final proposal or that final legislative analysis. And that's when the board takes action. And then, of course, not quite a clock, but it generally goes in this, and it could be at different times of the year, but it always starts out with staff are identifying bills impacting the board or issues that that might merit a legislative proposal. So in the bill process, obviously, the legislature introduces a bill. We take a look at it and say, oh, I think this might affect us. Let's write an analysis. In the other circumstance, committee's been looking at an issue and the committee finds, oh, you know what, we've got an issue with this. I think legislation could fix it. At that point, staff would say, okay, let's create a legislative proposal. So that would be the start. Then the staff is going to research issues, policies, past bills, alternatives to legislation. If there is one, could we do it administratively through regulations? And then we're going to collaborate, not only with DCA Legal, our wonderful counsel, with our budgets office. Is it going to cost us? How much might it cost us? Do we think it's a big impact? Is it a small impact? Which is really critical, because if it has a fiscal impact and we don't bring up that fiscal impact, we won't get the money for that staff position later on. So anytime there might be a fiscal, we need to pull up the fiscal flag and say, you know, I think that's going to take our licensing analyst so long to complete the process. We're going to need another licensing analyst to do this. Same thing for enforcement or anything else. And then, of course, we're going to also collaborate with the regulatory review group and stakeholders to determine the impact of the bill or the ledge proposal. And then we're going to write that final analysis and proposal. So all of that's going into there, and then we get to step 5. We present that analysis or proposal to the committee for the board to consider. And then the committee is going to consider the merits of the analysis or the proposal, and the committee is going to provide their direction or revisions along the way to the analysis and proposal for the board consideration. And then, of course, number 8, that committee is going to do their presentation of the proposal or the analysis at the full board meeting. And the board's going to deliberate the merits of the analysis or proposal, going to take any recommended actions or even change the recommended action. That's always up to the prerogative of the board. And then 10, the board's going to take a vote. They're going to take a vote on action, on the analysis, or on the proposal, and they're going to direct staff, you guys do, on follow-up actions. So when you say, we want you to work with that member on this, or we want these kind of amendments, we think this would be important to change, or you know, you want us to work with such advocacy groups on whatever. That kind of direction that you're going to see usually comes out of the analysis and the recommended positions. And then in 11, staff's going to advocate the board's position. So you guys took a policy position on AB 215, and you said we're supporting if amended. So you've told us you want these amendments. We're going to go and try and get those from the author. We're going to go meet with other groups, the legislator staff. We're going to try and get those amendments, see what we can do. Obviously, we're going to keep reporting back at committee meetings. We're also going to report back at the board meeting. And then staff reports back on all those changes along the way. Maybe there was an amendment. They took our amendment. Now we'd like to take a support. You know, now the amendments are made. We'd like to move to support. Or like last year, it's come to the end of the process. They didn't take our technical clarifying amendments, and this bill's worth taking a support. Let's move to that. And then the legislature, of course, on step 13, and the governor, they're going to act. That's always the question part. We'll move along from there, but wherever they go, we'll be reporting back to you. And then finally, we're going to create, if a bill's been passed, an implementation plan. So just like our sunset bill, staff is going to detail out what all changes we need. Do we need breeze changes? Do we need staffing changes? Do we need website changes? All of the little things that just even the smallest little bill, a little change can kick off a lot of changes at a board. So we'll detail those out. Also, if the governor's vetoed it, and the governor put those concerns in his veto message, we're going to take those seriously and say, what does the board need to consider? And say, okay, does our committees need to? Does licensing committee want to take a look at this? Does outreach and education want to take a look at this? What can we do to address those concerns or veto message? And then, of course, right after 14, you start the process over. So in our circumstance, staff took a look at a veto message. The board took that veto message very seriously. We'd like to send it back to committee. So then committee took a look at, what are we doing? Do we need a change? And if they did, they go right on back to one. We do need a change. Let's create a legislative proposal, and then you start the not quite a clock all the way over again. So obviously, I didn't want to put this in any timelines because you can hit somewhere in different spots, but this is how this goes in the board's process. This is how staff operates, and this is how we try and get everything out to you, to the public, take action, and advocate for your position. Questions?
I don't have a question, but I really appreciate this analysis. I think you really did a really good job. It helped me kind of see everything that legislation has to go through, and I really appreciate that, and gave me a different kind of thought about it or perspective. The other thing I want to say, and I don't think any of y'all, when my kids were young, there was some cartoon on. What? Was it Schoolhouse Rock, where they talk about how a bill becomes a law? So.
I love that video personally. I didn't put it in here. I had it, but I thought, no, I can't take up too much time. So you did miss the fun how a bill becomes a law video, which I love.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
That was great, but you were really good.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say as well, as I was sitting here looking at that and looking at it from perspective of public policy, you did an exquisite job of explaining the public policy process and how you took the information that we do all the time and you crafted it and put it into this public policy process, which is that messy stuff. It's messy, but you culled it and put it into a way that we can get it. And since we are so, when we look at our government, we're so centralized that it's easy to understand policy on any level because we can always go back to this and look at this. So I just want to say, I'm sitting there and I can hardly contain myself, truly, because I'm saying, oh, wonderful. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this for us, and thank you all, the whole staff. And these handouts are absolutely marvelous. So you know I'm going to want
yeah, that is completely fine.
Stuff with this. Oh, yes.
You are more than welcome to all of the materials. And I do want to give a quick shout out to our DCA legislative staff who provided me with some of those visuals that I got to chop up and move around for just our board. They were very gracious in letting me use some of the visuals so it wasn't reinventing the wheel for you all. Because I was like, I know there's an easier way to do this than just craft it to just ours. So that was, thank you. So hopefully that provides us with the context. I know sometimes issues feel like they just pop up on us, especially when it comes later in the process and it comes August and we're not sure why we need an urgent meeting right now. This kind of the deadlines and the process and how it can get messy, and then always understanding they make their own rules, so they also get to break their own rules. When they do a rule waiver, things cannot be an issue for a while, and then suddenly they are. Something could have died early in the process, and then they decide, I just want to resurrect it later, and suddenly it comes back on our radar. So it can throw us for a loop, but if we have that context, I thought it would help to start off the year with this general understanding. So, you're welcome.
Burns, before you sit down, are there any comments from the public or questions from the public? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, before we break for lunch, we're going to go to item number 11, was it 10? 10, which is the Executive Officer's Report.
So glad I get to follow that riveting presentation. Thank you, Ms. Burns. No pressure. Included in your meeting materials is item number 10, which is the Executive Officer Report and the DCA update. Just to let you know, as Ms. Monterrubio mentioned, we did hire a probation coordinator, as well as a limited term licensing analyst in our licensing unit. We only have As of today, one vacancy, and that is the licensing and breeze coordinator position. That was the position that was modified when Ms. Johnson left the board, and that is pending background as of right now. So we're hoping to get that new person on board within the month. And I'm happy to entertain any other questions that the board members have.
Is there any public comment or questions on the executive officer's report, as the board doesn't seem to have any questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Sorek. It is now, according to my watch, 12:15. According to that clock, it's 11 after 12. We're going to take a 1-hour break for lunch.